order. Jerry, if you would note that Commissioners Karen Hall and Bill are absent today, and Commissioner Farabee from the County Board is representing the County Board today. Approval of the September 28th minutes. The minutes are in our packet. Does anyone have any additions, corrections, deletions? Not entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of September 28th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Approval of the agenda, and for the audience, if you haven't, the copies of the agenda are in the back bookshelf for your information. Approval of the agenda as presented. We have 19 agenda items with items 3 through 10 on the consent calendar. Move first, seek a motion first for approval of the agenda as published, unless there's any changes by staff or commissioners.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second for approval of the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Consent calendar. The following items have been placed on the consent calendar for action to be taken on all items in accordance with the staff's recommendation by single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by the planning commissioner, staff member, audience member for separate consideration. The findings of the planning commission are recommendations of the county board of commissioners who will make the final decision. And first go to staff. Any items of the consent items 3 through 10 the staff wishes to pull?
Staff does not pull any.
Any of the commissioners wishing to pull any of the items 3 through 10? If not, PJ, if you could read the items for the record,
Sure.
3 through 10.
PJ Conover, Planning Department Director. Item number 3, conditional use permit review 9159 for Melissa Earnhardt to review a single-wide mobile home as a single-family residence. Staff recommends to continue the review of CUP 9159 to November 9th, 2015 Planning Commission meeting. Item 4, conditional use permit review 9254, Gerard and Elizabeth Heck to review a single-wide mobile home to be used as a single-family residence. Staff recommends to continue the review of CUP 9254 to the November 9th, 2015 Planning Commission meeting. Item 5, conditional use permit review 0845 for Elaine Anderson. Stephanie Anderson is the agent to review a single-wide mobile home to be used as a temporary residence while constructing a single-family residence. Staff recommends to continue the review of CUP 0845 to the November 23rd, 2015 Planning Commission meeting. Item 6, conditional use permit review 1427 for Wayne and Phyllis Krell to review a single-wide manufactured home to be used as a permanent residence. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1427 with 6 conditions. Item 7, conditional use permit review 1429 for Isaac Malsum to review the use of an existing private airstrip to be used as for the applicant's personal aircraft. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1429 with 7 conditions. Item 8, conditional use permit 1528, Michael and Erica Radke. Kathleen Cowell is the owner to allow for a single-wide mobile home to be used as a ranch hand residence on the subject property. Staff recommends approval of CUP 1528 with 8 conditions. Item 9, conditional use permit 1529 for Jim and Mary Skull to allow for a cabin located on a subject property to be used as a ranch hand residence. Staff recommends approval of conditional use permit 1529 with 10 conditions. Item 10, conditional use permit review 1428 for Don Barnes to review a vacation home. Staff recommends to continue conditional use permit 1428 to the October 26, 2015 Planning Commission meeting.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to pull any of the items 3 through 10 as read by our planning director? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion for approval of consent calendars, items 3 through 10.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried for the consent calendar. Take us to item 11.
Item 11 is vacation and relocation of easement 1504 for Monty and Nicole Albert. Other owners are Jeremy and Renee Hardwood. Essentially, the applicant owns about 3.6 acres of property, just recently purchased it. When the house was built in 2004 with a county building permit, it was located over what this development has as platted drain field easements. The house was also built too close to the property line. It is low-density residential with a 25-foot setback, and it is within that 25 feet. There's also, there is an existing shed on the property, which was located too close to the property line as well. This applicant has since moved the shed to a different location on the property, and so that shed is now in compliance. The applicant has also applied for a variance request for the existing house, and that will be heard before the Board of Adjustment on October 20th of this year. What the applicant is doing is taking the existing platted drain field easement and moving it over to where the easement was built, where the drain field was built. And that would be in harmony with the way that this subdivision is platted. It was routed through the interdepartmental review, and no items of significance came up, and staff recommends approval of the vacation and relocation of easement 1504 with 2 conditions.
Questions for PJ? And I would note that I will abstain from voting on this as Monty is an employee in our office, so. Any comments from the audience? Staff's recommendation is for approval of the vacation relocation easement with 2 conditions. I'd entertain a motion to that effect then.
I will move that vacation easement VE 1504 to vacate and relocate an existing septic system drain field be approved with 2 conditions.
I guess, just notice that on the staff report, it's listed as VE 15-04, but then on the recommendations.
VA, yeah,
it's listed.
I was just
VA.
writing that down on here, yep. Staff recommends approval of it, well, you guys already have the motion, so.
Which is it, VA or VE then?
VE,
VE, okay. I believe that was Barb's motion.
Yeah, was.
yep, it was.
We don't have a second yet, did we? Or
No,
do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Mr.
Oh,
Chair,
George?
how does this kind of stuff happen?
we don't have building inspectors. The planning department would really enjoy having building inspectors to be able to check up on the building permits when people apply for them, but the county does not have any at this time.
Well, he put the septic on his property. It looks to me like, if I'm reading this right, that the easement was located across property line.
That is correct.
That's my question. How's that happen?
It was platted that way, and that is typical for this development. These are not the only 2 properties that have that in this development.
And that was my next question, or follow-on question. This is typical of a few lots within the subdivision. So your drain field is going to be on somebody else's property.
Through an easement, that is correct.
I guess on the surface, I don't understand how that's a normal approach to private property rights, but I guess it's something for us to look into in the future. To me, it doesn't make any sense to have your drain field on somebody else's property.
Well, it actually was located on the property now, though, is that correct?
It's entirely on the property, almost dead center now, yes.
According to what's here, he located it properly on his own property, but he just didn't follow the easement, and the easement was on somebody else's property.
I don't know if he located it properly. That's what he's trying to fix now. It's located only on his property, but it was supposed to be located within the platted easement from 2001.
So you're right, the drain field, the entire system is on his property.
Yes, it is.
At this point, physically, it's on his property.
Yes, and that's what the relocation of the easement is for.
And I guess the other question I'd have is Albert's an owner along with, there's co-owners Harwoods and Alberts?
Of Lot 2. Harwood's own Lot 1, Albert's own Lot 2.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? We do have motion and second, then all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carried. Item 12.
1 second. Item 12 is conditional use permit 1527 to bring into compliance an existing bed and breakfast to include special events and to allow for the sale of wine and beer in a low-density residential district. This is for Hysiga Lodge. The applicant is Carol and Kenneth Duncan. An existing land use is bed and breakfast, specialty resort, and recreation, soon to be hopefully recreational resort, as staff recommendation will show. Hysiga Lodge was built and has been in operation since 1908. It currently has a state specialty resort license, 57040. They recently applied for a uniform alcohol license application through the Auditor's Department. The lodge was operating legal non-conforming since its inception. With the increase in use, which would be the request for wine and beer sales, that essentially takes away their legal non-conforming status, hence the need for this conditional use permit. There are 3 properties that the owner owns, and in your staff reports you can see the long one, which is pictured above, which is over 1 acre. Also the one immediately to the left, which has what we call the annex on it, which is 0.3 acres. The larger portion, the larger lot with the long tail, if we want to call it that, is almost entirely covered in floodplain, except where the existing Hysiga Lodge is. There's no floodplain or floodway over on that property at all. Again, it's been in operation since at least 1908. The property to the west is owned by Kenneth, is 0.31 acres. Kenneth is Carol's husband. There is no floodplain on that property. It does have what they call an annex, which was built in 1951 and was brought into compliance through a conditional use permit number 1205 in 2012 and has not received a review and is due for a review in 2016. Carol also owns a property directly to the south, which is in your staff reports, which is 0.10 acres, which she uses primarily for parking for Hysiga Lodge. In 2005, the previous owner of Hysiga Lodge attempted to bring the lodge into compliance by adding coffee sales, coffee bar, beer and wine sales. In September 2nd, 2005, staff recommended denial of 0532 based on inadequate parking and necessary septic system upgrades. On that same day, the applicant withdrew their request for approval, and the Planning Commission accepted the applicant's request. The annex, as stated previously, is under conditional use permit 1205 for a multifamily dwelling duplex, and it was not part of anything with Hysiga Lodge other than a standalone item. It was approved by the Planning Commission with 9 conditions on October 22nd, 2012. If this conditional use permit for the specialty resort is approved, the conditional use permit for the annex will need to be ended at a future Planning Commission meeting. A lot of the buildings on the subject property do not meet proper setbacks in a low-density residential district. The setbacks are 25 feet. The applicant has applied for setback variances for all the existing structures on the property, and that will be heard by the Board of Adjustment on October 20th, 2015. In talking with staff from the Auditor's Department, they are ready to move forward with a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for the beer and wine sales per the applicant's request. They're just waiting for the planning concerns to be taken care of at this time. The specialty resort license that the owner has is mainly because it's a bed and breakfast with at least 10 bedrooms and an average of 20 guests per night. Carol meets that standard and therefore by state standards is a license as a specialty resort. The term specialty resort and bed and breakfast tend to be thrown around interchangeably, and it appears that it's better to advertise a bed and breakfast than a specialty resort, especially for the character of this lodge. The bed and breakfast and specialty resorts have been allowed in Pennington County via conditional use permits in the past. Historically, bed and breakfast and specialty resorts have been permitted as recreational resorts. Our zoning ordinance does not have specific sections for specialty resorts or bread and breakfast, so we're just trying to fit them in as best we can with what we have. Recreational resorts are listed as a conditional use permit within general agriculture only. They are not listed in any other zoning district as permitted or conditional use. They are allowed in PUDs with certain restrictions. However, they have been allowed in other zoning districts other than general agriculture in the past. There are similar and comparable uses in the other zoning districts to bed and breakfast and special resorts, and those are listed in your staff report. Haciga Lodge is, as stated, located in low-density residential, and again, it's not permitted or conditional use. The applicant is not requesting to rezone the property to general agriculture, which staff believes would actually be an inappropriate use, as the surrounding use is primarily, the immediate surrounding use is primarily residential with a little bit of general agriculture, but the old town of Haciga has grown around the lodge, and they have grown in harmony together, and staff would feel that a rezone would be inappropriate. This request was routed through the interdepartmental review, and no items of significance were brought up. The zoning ordinance lists 5 factors the Planning Commission may consider in reviewing a conditional use permit. Number 1, that the effect upon the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity for the uses already permitted and upon the property values within the immediate vicinity. Haciga Lodge has been located on the property for over 100 years and is considered, at this time, a legal nonconforming use. And there are no complaints on file through our office as to the operation of Haciga Lodge. However, expanding the use could have a negative effect on the use and enjoyment of the surrounding properties. In 2005, that was one of the major complaints of the surrounding landowners, was the possibility of having a bar on the property. But again, that conditional use permit request was pulled. Second item to consider is that the effect upon the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding vacant property for uses predominant in the area. Haciga Lodge is located on the property and again, for over 100 years, very bad terrain, very steep, lots of floodplain. There's not much room for expansion in that area. Item 3, that utilities, access road, drainage, and other necessary facilities are provided. Access to the property is via Haciga Road onto a 20-foot wide access and utility easement, which is a triangle trail from off of South Dakota Highway 44. Item 4, that off-street parking and loading requirements are met. And as you remember, this was one of the things that brought conditional use permit in 05 to an end. Section 310 of the Pennington County Ordinance requires that parking for the use be on the lot in which the use is intended or within 200 feet of the building of its intended use. The existing parking areas for Haciga Lodge are either on the property they serve or within 75 feet of the building it serves. This is that third lot that the owner owns, which is empty and has been used traditionally for overflow parking on the property. So, our ordinance requires that there be 1 parking space for each guest room. She has 10 guest rooms, so we have 10 spaces right there. 1 parking space for 3 employees. She doesn't have more than 1, so even applying 1 there is loose. Plus 1 per 100 square feet of usable floor space. The Department of Equalization has just under 12,000 feet listed as livable space, so that would be another 11 uses. So with the loading and unloading requirements of 1 additional spot, we're up to 22 spots for parking on the 3 lots that the owners own. Staff has looked at the lots, measured them, and per our ordinance has enough space for actually 26 parking spaces on the subject properties. Number 5, that measures are taken to control offensive odor, fumes, dust, noise, and vibration and lighting. The proposed conditional use permit may generate noise, odor, fumes, dust, and lighting that could be offensive to the surrounding property owners. However, staff has not received any complaints regarding the operation of Haciga Lodge up to this point. Finally, again, Haciga Lodge maintains a specialty license in good standing with the state. It's been in operation for over 100 years and does not have any complaints. The existing land use of Haciga appears to be in harmony with the surrounding land use, and the town of Haciga and the lodge have grown together. Staff recommends approval of conditional use permit 1527. I'm going to change it from 26 conditions to 25. as condition 17 and condition 14 are redundant. And would just like to add to the end of condition 14, for it to read that a smoke detector be placed in each sleeping room utilized for Hysiga Lodge, a minimum of at least one smoke detector per floor per South Dakota Codified Law 3418. Yes?
Question. Can you clarify this on-off sale liquor license? I mean,
Okay. And I had to ask the same question with the auditor, because there's a list of different things that they could do. This would allow someone to go to, who has a room in the annex, to go into the lodge, get a bottle of wine, and go back to the room and drink it. That's what it allows. It allows it to come out of the building and off the property.
okay, so it doesn't allow for sale of liquor by drink or anything like that?
By drink, what do you mean?
Well, you don't go downstairs and order a glass of wine.
You could.
You can.
You could. But from Vicky at the auditor said they could physically buy the bottle and take the bottle with them when they leave. That's what the on-off
Okay, but
is.
what I'm saying is we're not establishing a sort of a bar-type environment. I guess that's what I don't object to that necessarily, but I'm just curious about it.
I don't know what the exact intentions of the applicant
There's a
are.
profound difference
Oh, there
between,
she is back there.
Oh.
But she has never indicated that she wants to open a bar. She just
Right.
wants to provide an additional amenity to the people who stay at the lodge.
to me, there's a profound difference between somebody going into a common room, everyone sitting around drinking, as opposed to someone buying a bottle of liquor or wine, in this case, wine or beer, taking it to their room and basically consuming it privately. I mean, and that's the distinction I'm trying to establish. But you say there is not to be any, or you don't intend, maybe she can clarify that when she comes up, but.
She wants, yeah.
Okay.
She has never indicated she wants to open a
Well,
bar.
let me ask the second question, which sort of dovetails with this. How will the status quo be changed if this is all approved? How will
Status
things,
quo.
how will things be different at Hysiga Lodge in terms of the operation and activity if this were to be approved, in your judgment?
They're increasing the use by selling alcohol,
Right, but
but what I'm not,
what does that imply? Does that mean we're going to have more people, significantly larger numbers of people come to Hysiga Lodge?
or happier people, I don't know.
Well, we might have happier, more content people, yeah.
Maybe asking the applicant what her motivation was behind it would be appropriate.
There certainly would be no objection at this point to somebody arriving on the premises with a case of alcoholic beverages in their trunk probably and going into their room and consuming it, right? Having purchased it somewhere else. So, okay. Well, maybe she can clarify a couple of these.
Okay, sure.
Before we go to the applicant, let's see if there's further questions for PJ. Any other questions for PJ? I get, George.
Excuse me, Chair, you did say that staff has not received any complaints?
You left out not.
Yeah, staff has not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, on page 8.
Thank you.
It says, however, staff has received any complaints.
Hundreds.
Has
no.
not.
Has
You
not.
said not.
Not a single phone call, not a single thing in writing.
Since 1908, huh?
No. There's nothing in our records that has a complaint.
PJ, I guess I have a question, and this is probably more generic. We've kind of had this discussion before, is, you know, do you meet all the requirements before the conditional use permit is issued? And specific item 22 on the setback, you said they're in the process of, you know, requesting those variances, but they're essentially being given a year, because it says until the next review, and the next review is, if we adopt this, is under number 26 for a year, for 1 year prior to review. So they have a year to get the setback variances. And, you know, like I said, this is more, I'm not objecting to this, I guess, and especially given the history of how long this has been there, and the setbacks probably didn't exist when the
That
buildings
was
were built.
staff's thought as well.
You know, so I mean, I don't object to it here, but I'm just kind of, from our administration standpoint, being consistent. I mean, do we want to make sure all conditions are met prior to granting the conditional use?
And that's correct. Usually what we'll do is just say you can't use it as a special resort until all these conditions are met.
Right.
So staff did not want to make her stop all of her reservations for the 2-month period that this was going on, or at least until this is approved on October 20th. So that was my thought as far as giving it a year.
Well,
And
like I said-
and she has also already applied for it, which is uncommon.
And like I said, in this case, I don't object. I mean, I'm sure that the lodge was there before any setback requirements were ever recorded,
Yeah.
you know, so I mean, it makes sense in this standpoint. but
In
I
this
mean,
one, yeah. We didn't want to put her out of business for the meantime.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. I guess,
Mr. Chair, to piggyback with what you're saying, I'd like to talk about the variances for the various buildings that aren't set back. Should we talk about that, or let her come up and give her her side of the story first?
Yeah.
Whichever.
yeah, I was gonna ask the applicant, if wanted to address the questions that were raised, so.
I'm Carol Duncan. I own Hysiga Lodge, and my husband and I own what we're calling the annex. And I made the application for a beer and wine license because I have a lot of guests who show up for their stay, and they're from all over the world, from all over the state, and they ask where can they get a bottle of wine, or would I serve them a glass of something. And I would love to be able to do that. I mean, that's the primary reason. I also have some neighbors who have said, can I just bring something up onto your porch and look at the creek while I have my beer or my glass? And then, as you mentioned, there are other people who would like to go to where we have them lodged and just relax and watch TV. So anyway, it was for the purpose of helping my guests get something at my place that they usually have to go to Johnson Siding or to town or somewhere else to get. The other thing we do is meetings, and we do some retreats. We do a few breakfasts, things like that. And it would be so nice to have a mimosa with breakfast, or to be able to serve a glass of wine. We do have guests who bring their own. That's the only way we can do it right now. And we don't even pour for them, of course, because we don't have this license. So we thought it'd be a great opportunity.
Jim, did that answer you?
Yeah, that's sort of as it was explained and as anticipated, and it sounds, from my perspective, quite sensible.
When we say that we do not intend to open a bar, we don't plan to do any, advertising in the journal, come out for happy hour or anything like that. That's not really our kind of business at all. And we have a nice neighborhood, a quiet neighborhood. And we've had, the majority of the neighbors have said, we support you 100%. Do we need to write you a letter? And then I think I've talked to one person who has a few trepidations about it, and he said he would see what happens. So,
George?
You did say sell and serve,
yes,
so you sell individual. To answer
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman's question, you would serve an individual beer or glass of wine, or?
we have a restaurant license, and we would like to be able to serve a glass of wine at our meetings and with dinners if guests order them.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thanks.
And those licenses will be brought by the auditor before the Board of Commissioners after all the planning stuff is done. So there's still one more final step.
We do have a recommendation from staff for approval, a conditional use permit, CU 15-27 with 25 conditions. And condition 14 is modified by basically incorporating parts of 17 into that, so.
I would so move.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Now, before we vote, in fact, I should have done before the motion, it was at this time that the determination was made that adding beer or wine sales is an increase in nonconformity of the property. And I guess I'd sure like some explanation as to who made the determination and on what grounds.
It wasn't an increase in the it wasn't an increase as you stated, it was an increase in the nonconformity, therefore taking away the legal nonconforming status per our ordinance. The determination was made by myself, the planning director, and Kinsley Grove from the state attorney's office.
and this is a question at some point in time, the county's gonna have to decide at what point does a change require a person to go back and bring everything into compliance? And I'm glad this is on the, on the agenda. From my viewpoint, I can't see adding a beer and wine license making any change to any other thing on the property, any other situation on the property. The example I use, let's say you got a huge ranch and you have all kinds of buildings sitting around that are 22 feet from the property line or whatever. And you come in for a building permit, you gotta bring everything up to code. It makes no sense. And this is another perfect example of why does she have to get variances if these buildings have been there long before Pennington County ever thought of planning and zoning? Well, why now? And on what grounds? They were there. There's been no new buildings in lots of years, correct, ma'am?
Correct.
So the existing lodge additions, annex, and shed do not meet setback requirements. When they were built, there were no setback requirements. So why now? Obviously, I can't, I'm certainly going to vote for letting, granting a beer and wine sales license, but the conditions for having variances, I can't go along with that. Just makes no sense to me.
And the variance will be discussed at length at the Board of Commissioners meeting for the Board of Adjustment of specifically why it is stated in our ordinance that if the nonconformity as far as the buildings is increased, then you lose your legal nonconforming or also the use on the property, and that is why the legal nonconforming status has been taken away per our ordinance.
Which condition is that requires the variances?
That would be, I think 22 is Sigston? 22.
22 is
Mr. Chair, I'd make a substitute motion that we approve the applicant's request minus condition number 22.
we have a second.
What's the motion? I'm confused.
Substitute motion to remove 22 that.
To
that
approve
need
the-
for-
Applicant's request minus condition 22.
Sorry, I'll wait till a second.
I'll second.
Have a motion and second for the substitute motion.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Sorry.
I just want to clarify what you're telling us. So the whole idea of taking away our property's nonconforming status is to eventually, at some point in time, every property in the county theoretically would, you want everything to be in conformance with the variance at some point in time, right?
Yes, the standard baseline protocol of zoning ordinance for the county, correct.
So that on a case-by-case basis, you review variances to decide if they meet acceptable standards, right? To grant a variance. I mean, because you don't expect people to move their building, a big,
No,
huge structure
absolutely
like
not.
this.
Absolutely not,
And
right.
so, on a case-by-case basis, then you will review whether or not variances should be granted for those non-conforming properties that have lost their status, right?
Yes, and in other
That's the whole intent.
situations, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess, and if I'm kind of piggybacking on what Lori's saying, my understanding would be then if that she goes through the variance process, it actually makes it easier to add buildings or getting, a future building or anything, because now you'd have a variance to basically clear anything that's been there. So I mean.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to the landowners for doing variances, absolutely.
Are the variances permanent? For example, if this property sells again, does the variance go with it?
Oh, yes. Yes, it will.
Does.
The extreme downside is if a variance isn't approved, it requires four commissioners to approve a variance. That's the extreme downside. The practical side is, why does a citizen have to go through this nightmare of sweating out a variance when there's no need for it? This property was built long, long before variance, and And this assumes that the variance or the parameters are adequate and proper. You know, at 25 feet, in general ag, that's the setback, but in suburban residential, it's 8 feet. Just a bunch of arbitrary numbers. So I guess, like I said, the downside is, what happens if the variance is not approved? Then we wind up in court. That's the downside.
I mean, there is that possibility that you're correct on that.
And making it easier for another, I guess, if, in this case, there's probably no room to add another building, but if there were room to add another building, you would still have to be set back whatever this arbitrary number is, the new building has to be set back.
I guess I would hope that the county board would look at it the same way we are, that this has a historic significance, and it actually opens it up easier for them to do changes in the future. I guess, go to Kinsley, it looked like here.
Kinsley
Can
Grove,
offer
the
some
state's
input?
attorney's office. Yeah, it was something where it was just legally required based upon the change in the use. That's just something that it threw it out of legal non-conforming status, and so the variance is required, but there are plenty of reasons to grant a variance in this instance because of the hardship. So I guess it would be, I don't see how a variance wouldn't be granted on this one because all of the reasons are there. So,
Well, Mr. Chair, change of use, what's the change of use of the buildings and the physical location on the property?
because you're allowing people to drink alcohol on the property, and it's a significant enough change in use so that somebody actually has to go get a permit through the auditor's office to allow that type of a use. So it's not just a simple change of use. It could actually change, whatever rationale is behind requiring a license for pouring liquor pouring wine or beer on the property and allowing all of that. It's a significant enough change that a license is required, so it's not something, I guess I don't know all of the rationale behind requiring that type of a license, but probably neighbors' input on something like that, potential for leading to intoxicated drivers, any sort of public intoxication concerns. There's probably a lot of rationale behind that requires a license. And so because that's the change, it was enough to throw everything out of legal nonconforming.
Mr. Chair, not to be argumentative, but the mere requirement of the folks in Pier to require a license, to me, doesn't in any way equate to a significant change in use. That might be 0.5% of our business. So using the criteria of merely requiring a license, I certainly couldn't equate that with significant change in use. And what happens with her all the rest of her non-conforming, I presume, of course, in this case, is probably the waste disposal is probably a license out of Pier, and I don't mean to open up a can of worms I probably shouldn't be doing, but what happens if she's not sized correctly for on-site wastewater?
She is.
But if she weren't, would she have to go back and?
Yep, that's what was one of the requirements in 2005, which the previous owner already fixed.
I guess we're reaching into private property rights where we shouldn't be reaching. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have a substitute motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign?
Aye.
Aye.
Jerry, roll call.
Yeah.
No.
Lori?
No.
No.
Barbara?
Yes.
George?
Yes?
Motion failed. 2-3.
So that takes us back to the original motion, which was approval with the 25 conditions. That would include 22. Any further discussion before we go to a vote?
Before we vote, does it require 4 to pass?
Yes. Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Or you no, do you want a roll call or are you clear on
Fine, I-
4? Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 13.
Item 13 is minor plat 1524 and subdivision regulation variance 1513. Whoops, open up the wrong one here. To combine 2 lots and to create Lot 3 of Rushmore Cave subdivision and to waive plat and requirements. The applicant is Chuck Ferguson and Donna Ferguson, Chelsea Ferguson, Chuck Ferguson, Donna Ferguson. The surveying agent is Hanson Surveying. This has been before you several times in different formations. Essentially what they're looking to do, let me bring it up here. Chuck owns all the properties outlined in red and blue. The portion of property outlined in orange actually currently belongs to the properties outlined in red. What Rushmore Cave, a representative for Rushmore Cave is looking to do is to purchase that portion there in orange and now to consolidate it into the portion in yellow to make a much larger lot. The portion in green, as you can see, is the existing portion, and that is zone general agriculture. If that orange portion was platted and consolidated into the yellow, it would then go into the highway service lot with the rezone that you'll hear next, and the property would look like that. Most of the property is actually in floodplain. There's some usable space on it, but not much. The applicants have been through a bunch of different options to try and get this done, and they are back to the original recommendation from staff to consolidate the portion of the property that they want and have it rezoned into the existing highway service property, which exists just to the south. It was routed through to interdepartmental review, and no items of significance came up. The applicants submitted also subdivision regulation variances for the following. Plat scale to be 1 inch to 100 feet. The submitted plat actually met that requirement when it came in from the surveyor, so we're not sure why that was originally requested, but it meets that requirement. Number 2, topographical information at 5-foot contour intervals. It's not required for staff's review. Road improvements at Ordinance 14 standards. It's a South Dakota Department of Transportation roadway and existing driveway, and no comments from them about that came back. Engineering road construction plans, again, it's a SDOT property. Percolation and profile hole information prior to filing the plat with the Register of Deeds. Staff comments, the applicant has made no mention of requiring and consolidating this land for the addition of any structures that would require an upgrade to the existing on-site wastewater treatment system. If such a structure is going to be built and the necessary permits applied for, the on-site wastewater treatment system will be looked at and the additions and or improvements will be looked at that time. The subdivision regulation variance was routed through the interdepartmental review and no items of significance were raised through that process. Staff, there's going to be 2 motions. First, staff recommends approval to waive submittal of the following subdivision regulation variances requested by the applicant. Number 1, platting scale to 1 inch to 100 feet, topographical information at 5-foot contour intervals, road improvements to Ordinance 14 standards, engineered road construction plans, and percolation and profile hole information prior to filing the plat with the Register of Deeds. That'd be the first of 2 motions.
Questions for PJ? Staff recommends approval of to waive the subdivision regulations as listed and as identified. Do I have a motion to that effect or a different motion?
How far is it from Rushmore Cave? I mean,
Across the road.
Sure, I'll show you. Go back. Whoops, going the wrong way, sorry, sir. Okay. This is Rushmore Cave property right here.
Oh, I see, okay. So
So
it's
it's
on
literally
the other
right-
side of the road,
Yep, and Chuck actually owns the portion of the property where the driveway goes through to Rushmore Cave.
oh, okay.
Can I ask a question?
Lori?
The Highway Services lot right now, can you tell me what the use of that is?
It looks like a dilapidated campground. There's
Campground.
buildings on there, the buildings are very old, yeah, but it's
Okay,
basically
but
a
it's not
campground.
currently being used as a campground?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So it's basically unused commercial like Highway Services property, right?
Yes.
Okay. No, and no one lives there, right?
Not that I am aware of, no.
Okay, thank you.
The purpose here is to sell the property, is that the idea?
Originally, back in July, when they came in, there was that portion that's outlined in orange that a representative from Rushmore Cave wanted to acquire and add to the property that's currently highway service. Some of the reasoning was to create a buffer and to obtain the stream that's there. And this had gone through several revisions in staff. Actually, the property line to the north that's slanted went down and up. The size has changed over time, and they're also going to have now two approaches on the property if this was to be consolidated. But the main reason was that Chuck wanted to sell it, and so they're going to consolidate it and apparently sell everything off. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
We're still a little confused by it, actually.
Is the applicant here and wishing to speak?
Yep, Chuck is.
Any other questions for PJ and before we go to the applicant? The applicant wish to add anything?
Chuck Ferguson. I think he's pretty much explained what we're trying to do there. This has been presented in a couple of different ways. And as you can see, that little light colored area there is an approach. And upon selling this property, we discovered that that approach is on another piece of property that I own. Everything outlined in the red and the blue I own. So consequently, we need to include that approach in that larger lot that's in the blue. We've ran it by the commissioners a couple of times, and we're going at the wrong approach, I guess, on how we wanted to present this. So we're back to square one and starting over doing what we should have done the first time.
Questions for Mr. Ferguson? Thank you. We do have was that letter addressing,
That's
really more the rezone?
Rezone.
That's a rezone.
No.
Yeah, that'll come up next. Did you get that? Came in after the staff report was done.
Staff's recommendation for the subdivision variances is to waive the submittal for the scale, topographic information, road improvements, engineered road plans, and percolation and test holes prior to filing the plat. Would I have a motion to that effect?
So do you want two separate motions?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do you want them, the first one, so the first one would be, I move that we waive the subdivision requirements, the 5 listed ones per staff recommendation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Now we'll look at the staff's recommendation is for minor plat approval with 8 conditions.
So the second motion would be for approval of minor plat PL 1524 with 8 conditions per staff approval,
Second.
or staff recommendation, sorry.
Motion and second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Oops.
Motion carried. I'll take us to item 14.
Item 14, rezone 1512 and comprehensive plan amendment 1511 to rezone approximately .914 acres from general agriculture district to highway service district, and to amend the Pennington County Comprehensive Plan to change the future land use from limited agriculture to highway service district. So if you're visual like I am, if you look up, this is the current zoning in the area. Property outlined in blue is general agriculture, and the property outlined in red is highway service. The future land use in the area is this, which the dark green, and again, that now encompasses the property outlined in blue, is limited agriculture. What they're looking to do, as stated before, is to take that portion of the property outlined in blue, here in red and partially in orange, and consolidate it into the property outlined in yellow, to take the existing land designation from this to that, and to change the comprehensive plan accordingly. Staff did receive on October 9th a letter of concern from Rita Wagner and Tom Pitlick about the requested rezone to highway service. The rezone and comprehensive plan were routed through the interdepartmental review, and no items of significance were brought up. And staff recommends approval of rezone 1512 and comprehensive plan amendment 1511 with no conditions.
First go to questions for PJ. Any
Can I
questions?
ask a question?
Yep.
Do we know the last time that this property was used for commercial or as a highway services?
It's been probably 10 to 12 years.
And it's just been sitting there idle since then?
Yes, it was my folks as we developed it in 1961,
Okay,
and it was ran up until my mother's death.
okay.
And it is still listed as a campground and tax-wise and everything, so
And so it probably operated as a campground for at least 40 years?
chances are good. There's some, question on what they're gonna use the land for, but that'll come up in permits and things that are needed,
But just for history, it operated as a campground for about 40 years, 35, 40 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and prior to that, do we know what the use was?
It was ag,
General ag?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for PJ or Mr. Ferguson? Other members of the audience wishing to speak to this?
Good.
Good morning. I'm Arlette Schweitzer.
I'm Dan Schweitzer, her husband.
Yes, my husband and I are here as well as representing our son and daughter-in-law who could not be here. We live on property right across Highway 40 from, I believe, where they're talking about. We're next to Rushmore Cave. Battle Creek divides us is all. 20 years ago, we bought our property in the country to plan to live out our lives in peace and tranquility that this land provided, and we're appealing to the commission to put yourselves in our place. Imagine your home and neighborhood open to commercial development that would directly affect your life and property. This has already happened when Rushmore Cave has expanded, and they're continually trying to expand. And the rumor is they want to put in a zip line across the highway or put in roller coasters, and we hear all of this. But we already are affected by Rushmore Cave with the zip line, and they scream all the time, and we can no longer enjoy our property, sit on our deck, and so on during the day. It's really changed our lives completely. And to open this up to more service development, we are so afraid of what's going to happen out there. And we're just appealing to you once again for your support to deny this, to be rezoned for that service road or service entrance or service, I'm so nervous, I don't even know what to call it. But we just know that that expansion is going to just directly affect our lives. Rita Wagner and Tom, I know, wrote letters, and I believe the Gills also did. I don't know if you received those letters, or if it was just.
Just the one from
Did you
Rita
receive
Wagner
Rita
and
and Tom? You didn't receive their letters?
They did.
Just the one from Rita Wagner, Tom.
Oh, yes,
Pellick.
okay.
But that's, if there's another letter other than that, we didn't.
Okay, there was supposed to be, but that's, we're just asking for your support because we're worried about the intent of this highway service.
We don't understand what that is changing it. Why would anybody want to change it unless they have some kind of a plan? And we're worried that the plan will include maybe more screaming, more noise that will affect our tranquil life that we thought we were moving into when we moved into the country.
Jim,
Question. When you bought this property 20 years ago, was this campground operating across the
No.
road?
No, it
was
wasn't.
closed up. Okay. The cave was there.
The cave was there.
Right.
And they were such good neighbors. The cave people were awesome neighbors, and we loved it. It was just
That's not the current owners, though.
No, not the current owners. We all got along very well with the cave people.
And we're not opposed to expansion, we're opposed to noise. You know, I think they've added a shooting gallery that's all enclosed. You hear nothing, that's fine. But the zip line, and they assured us the zip line is quiet. Well, it is, but the people on it scream when it comes down and they scream when it goes back. And screaming isn't a nice sound. You know, we've lived next to an elementary school and kids on the playground playing and laughing. That's a pleasant sound. But screaming is kind of offensive.
I think those are screams of joy, aren't they?
Oh,
Usually-
boy.
No, they're screams of fear.
Of terror.
Yeah.
And it's awful. It just is, it's awful. I'm working in my yard and oh, it's so sad you don't hear the birds, you hear people. It's like living next to someone at a movie theater screaming in a horror show.
But the issue here isn't the zip line, is it?
No.
No, but we're worried that this will be an expansion or something similar to that,
Right.
that will create more screaming.
But that would be a separate issue.
Yes, that would be a separate issue, but what is the intent of
There's an
this,
intent.
changing this highway to, what is the intent?
and you recognize the area in blue already is highway service. So I mean, that,
That already is.
thing that's allowed in highway service could be placed there right now.
But the zoning they're asking for now is is
The
more.
campground, the old campground.
Yes, I agree. I understand it's adding it, but I mean, the majority of the parcel still is and remains highway service.
Yes, where they drive into highway to
Rushmore
to
Cave,
Rushmore
yeah.
Cave, yes. We recognize that.
Could I ask a question? Could you remind me where you live?
We live 13602 Highway 40, so I don't know if I can see it on the map.
Could you maybe help them locate their
Well, and I
lot?
think PJ had a correction too.
Well, I understand, I think what you were asking as far as the property is on
blue
highway
area
service
is highway
and the- And the
service.
way you answered, yeah. The property right now, outlined in blue across the street from Rushmore Cave, that is highway service now, and that's what.
Where the
Commission-
campground is.
No,
Yes,
Yes,
the campground is on the,
this is what we're talking about.
oh,
it's already highway services.
Across the street and up to the northeast is the cave.
oh.
Yeah.
Well,
so-
where are you rezoning then? What are you rezoning?
Okay, if you go back, if you look at this right here, so the property outlined in red and in orange is the property outlined in red here. Okay?
Is that,
So that little bit in orange, they want to add to the
Oh,
bit
I see.
outlined in yellow.
Oh, I see.
so it is on the Rushmore Road side?
It's across the
Rushmore
street.
Cave
It's
side?
across the street from.
Across the street, where the old campground is.
Yep, exactly.
So, but that's what you're trying to rezone, where the old campground is?
Nope, that is already highway service. They just want to rezone the tiny little piece, this strip right here, and that right there,
Well, what would
outlined in
the
orange.
intent of that be?
Yeah,
I don't know what their intent is. They've stated that they, again, like what Chuck said, for the approach that's on the property, which would be a driveway, also to create a buffer and to get that portion of the stream,
The stream, the creek?
the creek, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, boy.
But they, what our concern was, is if they have no plans, why couldn't he sell it the way it is, zoned the way it is, and everything stay the way it is?
Why does it have to be changed?
Right.
Maybe,
I don't know if that's a condition. I mean, he put in an application as making an application. Yes, it's up to us to decide whether that gets forwarded on to the county board for rezoning and the comp plan amendment, but I mean, there's no requirement to state what they're
No.
doing. It can be.
We know that. We know that
Well,
we're just, I guess.
That's why I was kind of pointing out, the area in blue is already highway service. So I mean, anything that could be done in the highway service zoning could be moved forward at this point without any action here.
Okay, but why, I guess, I don't understand why we need more highway service. Why do we need more highway service? We're
My
so,
understanding is he's trying to incorporate the drive that's thought that was on the property but isn't.
And instead of having two zoning districts on the same lot.
Yeah.
But it's possible. They could buy, they own the blue, or they could buy the blue, they could buy the orange and leave it the way it is. It doesn't have to be changed and for Rushmore Cave to buy it.
It's not the desired route.
No, but they
no,
could do that.
but they could do it.
Staff would probably recommend denial of it, but they could ask for it.
That's what we're worried about.
Rita and Tom, as well as us, and there's others, like I said, our son, his wife is dying, he couldn't be here, but they live on the property by us, and there's all of us that are worried about our tranquil way of life that has changed and will continue to change if we keep having these changes made.
And-
We're a neighborhood.
And Commissioner Litzen wanted to know where you lived in relation
Yes,
to.
can you
yes.
show them?
So, without having to bring up a whole other system, so this is Rushmore Cave here,
Okay,
okay,
Where's the creek?
right here.
right.
okay.
If you're on that side of the road. let's
We're
try
not
that.
on the same, we're on the same side as Rushmore Cave.
Okay, that'd be on,
No,
We're on the same side as Rushmore
of
Cave,
the
of
road.
the
Oh,
highway.
yeah, I was
40.
thinking of Battle.
I think it's to the north
They must live over here
on the
somewhere.
curve.
so this pink area up here?
No, I think the yellow,
They live
Yeah, we
west of
live-
Right, but I'm saying the pink
Oh.
is Rushmore Cave property, so we're
Right, that's where we live right there.
right up here?
west of Rushmore Cave.
Here?
Yeah,
Okay,
That's it.
Okay.
that little cul-de-sac area?
Yep,
Okay,
the zip, we can see the zip line, practically, that's,
let me actually, so
Right
just up here where it says Ferguson.
Yep.
on the map. Okay.
correct.
thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Other questions for Schweitzers?
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, I hate to muddy the water, but talk about legal non-conforming. General ag is supposed to be 40 acres or more, and right now that piece of ground is legal non-conforming. It's .914 acres or whatever. So if nothing else, it should no longer be general ag. If we're going to be conform with our rules of 40 acres or more, .914, not anywhere close to 40 acres.
And that's why they're changing it to
Well,
rezoning it, that's correct, because it wouldn't meet the 40-acre minimum.
it's amazing how many small acreages out there are general ag,
Well,
but it shouldn't be general ag, .914. And I guess the other question, I don't know offhand, and I don't know anybody knows offhand, permitted uses in general ag versus highway service, are there significant differences in the listings?
Absolutely.
In general ag, you can have a recreational resort, and that's the only one. It seems kind of strange to me, but that's a different, a topic for a different day. But this property is .914 acres, shouldn't be general ag.
and this will change it to combine it with the highway service, in my understanding.
Yes, that's what the rezone request and comp plan amendment are, to turn it into highway services, so, because .914 does not meet general ag requirement, that is correct.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready for a motion?
Sure.
I make a motion that RZ 15-12 and Comprehensive Plan Amendments CA 15-11 to rezone with how many conditions?
No conditions on it.
No conditions.
Oh, that's right, no condition. Be approved.
Do I have a second? Motion and second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried.
And for the public, this still has 2 readings before the Board of Commissioners, and then a 6-week waiting period after that before it's final.
Do you understand that? I mean, you have can be appealed to the county, well, action by the county board, so. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I might add that for the Schweitzers and any other folks that have questions, as I understand the system, anything other than putting a few cows or horses or pigs or whatever on that property requires a permit of some kind. Is that basically true? Any uses require a permit,
Not any uses. Every zoning,
except a horse or a pig or a cow or sheep?
there are general provisions depending on the acreage and the amount of the animals that you put on, but every zoning district has permitted, which are just allowed without having to come into our office unless it needs a building permit, and then conditional uses, which the conditional uses require permits.
Let me rephrase it this way. Pretty much anything that they'd be concerned about in the way of disturbing their way of life would probably require a permit of some kind,
No,
generally speaking.
wouldn't think so.
I guess that's kind of, I don't know, Judge McCollum, I guess, like you're saying, there's a whole list of what's allowed and what needs
uses.
conditional use permits, so.
Yeah, what's offensive to one person isn't always offensive to another.
No.
That's correct.
On item 15, County Board Report.
The Board of Commissioners concurred with the Planning Commission's recommendation from the September 14th and September 28th Planning Commission meetings, with the exception of minor plat 1519 and subdivision regulation variance 1510 for Elvira Gillis, Davis Engineer as the agent. The board removed the below condition from the conditions of approval, that prior to filing the plat with the Register of Deeds, percolation and profile hole information be submitted to the Water Protection Coordinator and/or Environmental Planner for review and approval. This is primarily because the agent and the Water Protection Coordinator met prior to the meeting, and it was agreed that that could be added as an exception.
Items from the public. Joyce, you're our public, you left. Mr. Ferguson, so, did you have anything? General comments?
The intent is just to bring it into compliance.
Items from staff, building,
In your package, you'll have the 2015 September building permit report. Items to note, single-family residences are up 28% over this time last year. Our pole barn, sheds, and lean-tos are up 25%. Those are categorized under 328 other non-residential. Interestingly, the demolition for portions of family homes, single-family residences, are up 75%. Of people taking down decks or taking off rooms and then adding them. And our demolition of mobile homes is actually down 42% over this time last year. And that would be the removal or relocation of mobile homes. Nothing further to report on this building.
Where would you find apartment houses on this? I'm just curious.
Those would go under 102. They could go under 104.
Attached homes?
It just depends.
Oh.
I mean, if you want to call them apartment, or you call it one house with 2 living quarters,
Yeah.
and somebody else calls it an apartment.
No, but if somebody built a 60-unit
Ooh.
apartment building.
We haven't
Not
had
that
one of
We have
those.
very many in the county, but I'm just curious.
I'd have to look at the definition of each one of these. and
That's why
find out
we
what the
don't
best
have any.
fit.
You don't have a category for it.
Well, the categories were done, this was actually a list that's probably 10 years old, and we're trying to figure out where this list came from. Right now, it's just our baseline to be consistent with how everything is categorized. We're trying to update it, but we can't even find out where it came from, but this is what's been used, and this is what we report to the state and federal agencies, and then they take that, and that's where you get the reports that you hear on the radio. I mean, we're just one of many that report this way. But I can get your answer.
Yeah. Not very consequential, but.
any other questions for PJ? Other items from staff? PJ, do you have anything else?
Nothing additional.
Items from membership?
I do have a question, concern, I guess, most of these conditions have building permit be obtained, or condition, building permit be obtained for any structure exceeding 144 square feet or located on permanent foundation. Yet the ordinance, if I have the correct current ordinance, and I presume I do, all accessory structures at 144 square feet or less and not permanently anchored to the ground. Is there a difference, and if so, why?
The difference between the two? So between permanently anchored and, what was the other one that you stated?
Permanent foundation.
Okay. We consider concrete as a permanent foundation or permanently anchored. If somebody gets a shed and they move it in, it's a pre-built shed, and they bolt it onto the concrete or set it onto the concrete, we consider that requirement for a building permit.
But yet the law, and the ordinance's law, requires, it doesn't say anything about permanent foundation. At least not that I can find. It does say permanently anchored.
Okay. How would you like it to be interpreted?
Well,
So what you're saying is what you have been doing is policy rather than,
It was the interpretation of the ordinance
written.
by the staff.
Yeah,
as policy.
okay,
That is
that's
correct, and it's been
policy.
consistent.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you.
well, once again, the law says permanently anchored. Doesn't say anything about a foundation. You could have something in the air that's anchored. You have a building floating. You have enough balloons under it. Well, which is it? You know, throughout these documents, it's permanent foundation. But yet the law says anchored.
Does it say permanently anchored, or you have that in front of you?
Well, I presume this is the current ordinance.
I just didn't know if the word permanently was in there, so.
okay, this one is November 26th.
2014. Yep, that'd be the current one.
Perhaps the county board should rewrite that ordinance more specifically and in greater detail.
Staff would
Yeah.
like a comprehensive plan amendment to be approved, a comprehensive plan to be done so we can review everything for the type of items that Commissioner Farabee brought up, so that that item can be adjusted to be more accurate. I would agree.
Well, this is catch as catch can, though.
I'm sorry?
This would, you know, this one needs to be corrected. It can be done without a comprehensive plan.
It can be done
And
without a
it's-
comprehensive plan, and we have a series of amendments that we have for this ordinance, and we've held off on them to find out what would happen with the comprehensive plan. Yep. And there's no update at this meeting on it. It'll be in November of where we are on that.
And I guess I have really a completeness understanding of a comprehensive plan. I don't think it has any details about setbacks and permanent anchored and that kind of thing. That's a whole different document. Comprehensive plan is plan. And these are enforcement details. A whole different ballgame.
I would have to disagree. The enforcement details actually direct you towards where the comprehensive plan wants you to go. These are the players on the team. The team would be the comprehensive plan.
Mr. Chair, I guess I would like for next meeting to find out which phraseology, which guidelines, these are more than guidelines. These are actually specific requirements. Is what's been in these documents permanent foundation? Is that going to continue on, or are we going to follow the law as written, permanently anchored? That's my first request. Second request is I'd like to find out when the ordinance was changed to permanently anchored.
Staff would recommend, if we could, that it be moved to the November meetings.
Yeah, I have no issues with going to the November meeting. I guess on, as far as when changed, my recollection from 15 years ago was it's been always, at least that it's been permanently anchored is probably the word, but I mean, like, the only thing that I'm aware of that's changed in the recent is the square footage. Used to be, I think, 96 square feet for the county.
Can I ask a question? From what I understand is that, you know, I think as long as I've been here, there was one review of a few ordinances to make them more consistent, right? You know, to do terms. That's something you guys don't do routinely. Plus, you don't routinely, just every time you see a mistake, publish a, you know, a correction or whatever, because it would be expensive, right? You have to go through the whole, you have to go through the whole process to get something amended, right?
It's a very long process.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and-
and we're willing to do it. I mean, we have a lot of changes, but we want to do them methodically and with purpose.
And I guess what I'm saying in your defense, there's a reason maybe there's some inconsistent terms among the between the ordinance and what you put in the conditional use permits, right? That's been pointed out.
Yeah.
But you don't just automatically, like Barb was suggesting, catch as you can. You just don't jump on that right away and make an amendment. You wait until you've gone through some sort of process to make sure you've caught all of the other changes in an ordinance, correct?
Correct.
And so you have a process in place or a schedule in place to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Well, kind of to the specific question, I guess, you know, I don't know if there's a legal dictionary that, you know, Kinsley, that, you know, your trade uses or something like that, but I mean, like, to me, like, you know, if it's anchored, and the fact that it's permanently anchored, to me implies a foundation. But I don't know, you know, what legally that means or not, because I mean, like, if you drive a couple stakes in, to me, that's not permanently anchored, because those could be pulled out easily.
That would require us, for the people that get a 12-by-12 shed on skids, and if they were to put rebar in the ground and anchor it, they would then need a permit. We have more of those that we don't permit than we do permit. And so if we were to interpret it that way, instead of having on a permanent foundation, there'd be a lot more building permits for the public.
Well,
Was
yeah,
anchored.
but I guess I'm just saying, you know, how far do we break down the words, or do we rely on the legal staff to make interpretations?
If you're putting it on concrete, it's more permanent than if you're putting it on skids. That's, I would believe, the interpretation of that.
Oh, no, and I'm not, I'm agreeing with you. I guess
Yeah.
I'm just
Oh, I know.
saying, to me, it's anchoring is, you know, just driving a stake in the ground that can be pulled out easily isn't permanently anchored, you know, I don't know. But
And the one item we had today for Monty Albert, his shed was not permanently anchored to the ground, and there he was able to pick it up and move it. He did need a permit for size, but it wasn't anchored to the ground. It was on, what do you call them? Logs.
skids,
Yeah, skids
and
and
most
logs.
of those sheds are on skids.
So did he put it on a foundation this time?
No, he kept it
To me, that's where I see the difference there, where you're leaving a permanent imprint on the ground of something, yeah, you can bust out a foundation, but it takes a little more to bust out concrete than it does to pull out stakes or just, you know, skid something into a different location.
Staff's not against that by any means, improving the ordinances, absolutely, bringing it more current.
But if you have a shed, for example, that is just sitting on a piece of concrete and is not attached to it, you still count that as permanent?
Yes, because it's on the permanent foundation.
If you wanted to stay.
Foundation is permanent.
Unless it was on skids.
But if you
Then
wanted
if they
to,
put anchors into it, then by definition, it would need a permit, which we don't require at this point, because there's no permanent foundation.
Well, in some ways, it may be easier just to change, instead of using foundation, is to use the term permanently anchored. So, anyway, if you want to research that and bring it forward in the first meeting in November, appreciate it, so.
We can do it.
Any other items from membership?
Mr. Chair, there's a related issue is it shouldn't take until November to go back and find out how many times this 187 pages has been changed in the last 2 years. Let's say 2 years. How many times has this thing been changed in the last 2 years?
3 or 4, maybe? Maybe.
I think you have a state planning conference, gonna tie up some of the staff, so you'll be short staff. To
That's
me,
correct.
November seems reasonable.
That's correct.
That, the one out has a 2014 date on it. It has not been changed since, prior to that, since 2011. So we have to research to see what items were changed in 2011 for the zoning ordinance.
So there's been no amendments since 2011 to this document?
Not that I can find
I think there are.
off of the records, but we'd
I'm
have
pretty
to
sure
go
there
through
are.
the-
There
Are
are.
there?
Absolutely, there are. Worked on them.
Oh, wait, hold on, I'm sorry, I'm looking down at
Because
the,
even vacation home rentals would fall in that.
And that's being done right now.
So. Yeah, guest homes,
there were a few, but without having to go up and go get, the tracked ones that were done. About maybe 3 times, but there could be 5 changes in one of those. I wouldn't know without going up and pulling the book. So I have to clarify my.
other items for membership?
And I guess I'd close with this. I would think that the planning staff would be highly advised to start using the language in the law.
Move to item 19, adjournment. Entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.